Academic discipline, theoretical English grammar, lecture 9. Adjective is a part of speech. The lecture is based on materials from a course in theoretical English grammar by Mark Bloch. Categorical semantics of adjective. The adjective expresses the categorical semantics of property of a substance. It means that each adjective used in the text presupposes relation to some noun, the property of whose referent it denotes, such as its material, color, dimensions, position, state, and other characteristics both permanent and temporary. It follows from this that, unlike nouns, adjectives do not possess a full nominative value. Indeed, words like lawn, hospitable, fragrant cannot affect any self-dependent nominations. As units of infinitive sequences, they exist only in collocations showing what is lawn, who is hospitable, what is fragrant. The semantically bound character of the adjective is emphasized in English by the use of the prob substitute in the absence of the notional head noun of the phrase. I don't want a yellow balloon. Let me have the green one over there. Functions of adjective in the sentence. In the sentence, the adjective performs the functions of an attribute and a predicative. Of the two, the more specific function of the adjective is that of an attribute, since the function of a predicative can be performed by the noun as well. There is, though, a profound difference between the predicative uses of the adjective and the noun, which is determined by the native categorical features. Namely, the predicative adjective expresses some attributive property of its noun referent, whereas the predicative noun expresses various substantival characteristics its referent, such as its identification or classification of different types. This can be shown on examples analyzed by definitional and transformational procedures. You talk to people as if they were a group. You talk to people as if they formed a group. Quite obviously, he was a friend. His behavior was like that of a friend. Derivational features of adjectives. The most important suffixes and prefixes of adjectives are full, hopeful, less, lawless, ish, bluish, aus, famous, if, decorative, is, basic, unprecedented, inaccurate, premature. Among the adjectival affixes should also be named by prefix a, constitutive for the dative subclass which is to be discussed below. As for the variable dimutative morphological features, the English adjective, having lost in the course of the history of English all its forms of grammatical agreement with the noun, is distinguished only by the hybrid category of comparison, which will form a special subject of our study. Two large subclasses of adjectives, qualitative and relative. Relative adjectives express such properties of a substance as are determined by the direct relation of the substance to some other substance. Wood, a wooden hat. Mathematics, mathematical precision. The nature of this relationship in adjectives is best revealed by definitional correlations. Qualitative adjectives, as different from relative ones, denote various qualities of substances which admit of a quantitative estimation, it is of establishing their correlative quantitative measure. The measure of a quality can be estimated as high or low, adequate or inadequate, sufficient or insufficient, optimal or excessive. An awkward situation, a very awkward situation, a difficult task, too difficult a task, an enthusiastic reception, rather an enthusiastic reception, a nearly welcome, not a very hearty welcome, etc. Degrees of comparison. The category of adjectival comparison expresses the quantitative characteristics of the quality of a nominal referent. It gives a relative evaluation of the quantity of a quality. The purely relative nature of the categorical semantics of comparison is reflected in its name. The category is constituted by the opposition of the three forms known under the heading of degrees of comparison: the basic form, positive degree, having no features of comparison; the comparative degree form, having the feature of restricted superiority, which limits the comparison to two elements only; the superlative degree form, having the feature of unrestricted superiority. It should be noted that the meaning of unrestricted superiority is built in the superlative degree as such, though in practice this form is used in collocations imposing certain restrictions on the affected comparison. Thus, the form in question may be used to signify restricted superiority, namely in cases where a limited number of referents are compared. Johnny was the strongest boy in the company. Categorical idea of comparison. However, the oppositional interpretation of grammatical categories underlying our consideration does not admit of such an exclusion. On the contrary, the non-expression of superiority by the basic form is understood in the oppositional presentation of comparison as a prerequisite for the expression of the category as such. In this expression of the category, the basic form is unmarked member, not distinguished by any comparison suffix or comparison auxiliary, while the superiority forms, rest the comparative and superlative, are the marked members distinguished by the comparison suffixes or comparison auxiliaries. Forms of comparison. The synthetical forms of comparison in ER and EST coexist with the analytical forms of comparison affected by the auxiliaries more and both. The analytical forms of comparison perform a double function. On the one hand, they are used with the evaluative adjectives that, due to their phonemic structure, two-syllable words with the stress on the first syllable ending in are the graphophonic complexes than er, y, le, o, or words or more than two-syllable composition cannot normally take the synthetical forms of comparison. In this respect, the analytical comparison forms are in categorical complementary distribution with the synthetical comparison forms. On the other hand, the analytical form of comparison is different from the synthetical forms, are used to express emphasis, thus complementing the synthetical forms in the sphere of this important stylistic connotation. The audience became more and more noisy, and soon the speakers were drowned in the general hum of voices. The structure of the analytical degrees of comparison is meaningful word. These forms are devoid of the feature of semantic idiomatism, characteristic of some other categorical analytical form, such as, for instance, the forms of the verbal perfect. For this reason, the analytical degrees of comparison invite some linguists to call in question their claim to a categorical status in English grammar. In particular, scholars point out the following two factors in support of the view that combinations of more, most with the basic form of the adjective are not the analytical expressions of the morphological category of comparison, but free syntactic constructions, first, the more most combination are semantically analogous to combinations or less least with the adjective, which in the general opinion are syntactic combinations of notional words. Second, the most combination are like the synthetic superlative, can take the indefinite article expressing not the superlative but the relative meaning. It has a high, not the highest degree of the respective quality. The reasons advanced, though claiming to be based on analysis of actual lingual data, can hardly be called convincing as regards their immediate negative purpose. Less least combinations. A combination of less least with the basic form of the adjective. The general view of these combinations definitely excludes them from any connection with the categorical analytical forms. Strangely enough, this rejectionist view of the negative degrees of comparison is even taken to support, not to reject, the morphological interpretation of the most combinations. The corresponding argument in favor of the rejectionist interpretation consists in pointing out the functional parallelism existing between the synthetical degrees of comparison and the most combinations, accompanied by their complementary distribution, if not rigorously pronounced. The different choice of the forms by different syllabic phonetical forms of adjectives. The less combinations, according to the view, are absolutely incompatible with the synthetical degrees of comparison, since they express not only different but opposite meanings. Thus, the less least combinations, similar to the most combinations, constitute specific forms of comparison, which may be called forms of reverse comparison. Unity of the category of comparison. The two types of forms cannot be syntagmatically combined in one and the same form of the word, which shows the unity of the category of comparison. The whole category includes not 3 but 5 different forms, making up the two series respectively, direct and reverse. Of these, the reverse series of comparison, the reverse superiority degrees, is of far lesser importance than the direct one, which evidently can be explained by semantic reasons. As a matter of fact, it is more natural to follow the direct model of a comparison based on the principle of addition of qualitative quantities than on the reverse model of comparison based on the principle of subtraction of qualitative quantities, since subtraction in general is a far more abstract process of mental activity than addition. Thank you for attention.